Right, I think we'll get started. If anyone joins late, that's fine. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today. My name is Tim from Opportuni. We specialize in matching companies with great government contracts that they have a chance of winning. Think Tinder for tendering. And we're lucky today to be joined by Tom from Trust Keith. Tom, do you want to give a quick hello and who you are and what you do?
Yeah, cool. Hi, guys. Good to be here. My name's Tom. I'm head of delivery here at Trust Keith. We help startups and scale-ups get everything they need to be put in place to be compliant with data protection, help with information security, ISO 27001, and all of those sorts of things. I obviously have a background in data protection, but also interestingly, my career before this was entirely in the public service. I've been on the other side of the argument as well. So yeah, good to be here, and yeah, I'll hand it back to you, Tim.
Okay, so just to give you a brief overview of the format, I'm going to spend about 15 minutes or so introducing a little bit about how to find tenders and what to do with them, how to decide what to bid for, what not to bid for. Then I'll hand over to Tom, and I won't spoil what he's going to talk about because I'm not 100% sure of what he exactly is going to talk about. It's going to be a good surprise though, right, Tom?
Exactly. Hopefully.
I'm sure it will be. So when thinking about bidding for government contracts, the first thing to consider is where the hell do you start? What do you do? Finding the right opportunities is the key differentiator between success and failure. There are literally thousands and thousands of opportunities out there every single day, and it can be hard to decide where to start, what to bid for, where to even find them. So there's a number of different solutions out there that we would suggest having a look at if you're new to the world of bids and tenders. There's resources such as Contracts Finder, BidStats, and the government's Finder Tender Service. If you're new to tendering, they are great places to start to have a look to see what's out there. Or of course, you're very welcome to sign up to a free trial of Opportunity, and we'll send you things that are a good match. There are around 3,500 tender portals across the UK, so finding that needle of a haystack and the right opportunity can be a challenge. But finding the right opportunity is the first step in the process. Once you find the right opportunity and you've got a good understanding of what it is you want to go for, you then have some key decisions to make. So deciding what to bid for is, again, a key differentiator in success or failure. It's very easy to be attracted by shiny objects, to see a huge contract and thinking, actually, yeah, I'm going to bid for that. But not taking into consideration that it's possibly too big for you, it's not quite right for you. There's certainly contracts out there. Sorry, I'm just going to turn off my my notifications because I'm aware that I'm making some noise there. There we go. I'm still making some noise. Sorry. Oh, no, I'm sharing my... There we go. Hopefully that'll do the trick. Picking what to bid for is a key differentiator in what we're doing. So you might be a £1 million turnover company and you see a £20 million contract and you think, perfect, I'm going to go for it. But actually, you need to be realistic. If you are on the other side of the fence and you were the procurement team trying to pick someone to deliver a contract, would you trust a £1 million turnover company with a £20 million contract? Now, I'm sure you think you deserve it, and I'm sure you think you'd be capable of doing it, but in reality, it would be a hell of a struggle for a company to 20x and actually deliver to the same quality and the same standard that they had previously. So the first thing to do is start to look at the value of the contracts and helping you decide what you're going to bid for. So you can typically win a contract worth around 30 to 40% of your turnover. So that's per year. So I'll try and do some maths. Math isn't my strong point, but if you're a £100,000 turnover company, you're looking at a £30,000 to £40,000 per year contract. So that could be a 3-year contract worth £90,000, for example. And as a £100,000 turnover company, that would be a realistic thing to aim for. The other things to think about are DPS and frameworks. So a DPS or a framework is like becoming an approved supplier of a product or service. So quite often you'll find things like housing associations or the NHS, they'll build an approved supplier list, which is called a framework or a DPS, to build a list of approved suppliers who can provide the service as and when they need it. So things such as responsive work, such as cleaning or construction work, you quite often find a DPS or a framework. a DPS or a framework typically have no value assigned to them because you're becoming an approved supplier. You're not being given a direct contract. You're on the list to be able to bid for those contracts. So if you're new to the world of bidding and you see a framework worth 100 million, don't be put off by the value of that, because that might cover responsive works for a 10-year period for 15 different types of service. So if you get onto a DPS or framework, you're then invited to submit a response to opportunities on a call-off basis as they are available. So looking at the value of things is really important. There's some other things to consider when you're deciding what to bid for as well. Is, does this fit your core business? Is this what you are good at and what you've done previously? If it's something that you're taking a bit of a punt at and you think, oh, we can probably do that, or we might be able to do that, you just need to be a bit more realistic, because chances are there's someone out there and that's their core service, their core product, and they will be going all in on this opportunity. So having a punt or having a go probably isn't the best use of your time. Make sure it aligns with exactly what you do, what you're good at, what you've done previously. The whole point of the tender process is to give the buyer reassurance that they are buying a product or service from someone that can deliver. And if there's any doubt in that, you are not going to be successful in the tender. So try and pick your winners. There's some other things to do. So once you've picked the opportunity that you think is going to be useful, there's definitely some compliance and regulatory requirements in most sectors, which I will let Tom expand upon in more detail after me. But there's things to look at in terms of the questions. Look at the questions that are being asked of you. If you're asked to deliver a product or service, you'll be asked quality questions such as, how will you deliver the service? How will you maintain staffing? How will you ensure maintenance of quality standards? Trust Keith, of course. So there's a number of things that you will be asked to submit as part of your tender response. And it goes back to that whole thing at school. Read the questions before you get started. Have a read of the questions. Can you competently answer those questions and say, yes, we can do that. This is how we do it. And this is what we've done previously. So you can typically look through those questions and you get a good understanding, if you're realistic with yourself, of if you have a good chance of actually going for that contract and putting together some competent responses. Like I mentioned before, it's all about giving the buyer confidence in your ability. And by saying, yes, you can do it, this is how you're going to do it, and this is what you've done previously, that is a really good framework for responding to those questions. So have a read of the questions. Is there anything that sticks out that you can't do? Have a look at the specification document. So you'll be provided with a specification which tells you exactly what you are required to deliver. That specification document is your guide for how to respond. You might have a set way that you do things, but you need to relay it back to them as the client and say, we will do it the way that you request. This is how we'll do it. This is what we've done before. This is what we'll do in delivery of this contract. So once you've done those reviews, there'll be certain regulatory requirements. And I think probably quite an apt time to pass over to Tom to talk about some of those things and what you maybe need to consider going forward in the tender process. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I shall pass you over to Tom. But I should mention that if you have any questions at all, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. And Bron is there looking at those and will no doubt throw them at us at the end. But please don't be afraid to ask us as many questions as you see fit.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Yeah, it's one of those things. So one thing to note about the public sector is that they tend to be far more risk averse than other sectors. Private sector, big enterprise customers, and all of those sorts of things. There's a real tendency to want to avoid any risk. On that basis, there tends to be a requirement, therefore, to be able to demonstrate that you've gone over and above in giving them the reassurance that things are going to be secure and that you understand the requirements there. So one of the things that we see quite a lot with when it comes to data protection, information security, and all of those sorts of things that we're helping companies with is fairly substantial kind of requirements around due diligence, understanding the risk profile of the company that the public sector is going to be working with. One kind of key tip that I would say, and I think it's kind of jumping on your point, Tim, around are you confident that you can deliver this service if you're a £1 million pound a year turnaround customer and you're bidding for a £20 million pound a year contract? Are you confident that you're able to deliver that? The interesting thing I say, it's very much the same thing. If you're looking to delivering a 20 million a year contract, you're going to be expected to have the compliance bases in place, the foundations of compliance in place of a company that is able to deliver to 20 million pounds. The expectations are going to be high as well. So make sure that you have a good coherent suite and that you're confident that you're mature in these areas, because these areas can let you down. I think key considerations to think about is making sure you have good documentation in place. So there's going to be things around, say, managing risk, having a decent privacy policy. It seems quite basic, and actually the government have a slightly bad record with privacy policies, given the Brexit ferry contract that it turns out that they had copied it from a takeaway or something like that happened a couple of years ago. That's a great example of due diligence going wrong, and where you can really immediately hit the public eye with these sorts of things. But having something like a robust privacy policy, I mean, that's the first place that people can look. And you've got to think about this from a due diligence perspective. If I'm on the other side of the contract, that's the first place that I'm going to look at your organization to see if you've got everything put together well, if you know what you're talking about, if you reference the right laws. You know, we're post Brexit now. It's been a long time. Are you still talking about the EU GDPR? Are you talking about the UK GDPR? Are you still talking about the Data Protection Act of 1998? I mean, that hasn't been around for 3 years now, coming up to 4 years, and we see that all the time. That people go, according to the Data Protection Act 1998. Those little mistakes let you down, because what they show is that you don't have a good control and understanding and management of these things. If you can't get some of those basics right, it's going to be very difficult to trust you with some of the more complicated aspects of data protection and compliance. So think about your public-facing model. What are you demonstrating to someone, to a customer, to members of the public, to the person sitting on the other side of the tender who's doing that due diligence on you? What are they able to see publicly? Anything that's publicly, make sure it's very good and to a good standard, because those things can immediately let you down. I think also, additionally, other things to consider is that, realistically, a lot of the due diligence, as I said, it's going to be document heavy. There's going to be requests to see, do you have a policy that covers this? Do you have a policy that covers that? Do you have a process that does this, a process that does that? You want to be able to demonstrate, again, that you've got that same kind of coherence across the thing. A big mistake I see and see all the time are companies that download documents from websites. They tend to go, so taking the example of the Brexit ferry contract, that copied and pasted the privacy policy from a takeaway. Obviously, it's not acceptable. It doesn't work. It's completely wrong model to do. But you want to be thinking about this when you're downloading other policies and stuff from the website as well. I've seen companies that have a very, very good, say, incident and breach process and incident and breach policy. It's very good. And you think, wow, this is really good. And then they'll also have a policy about managing information assets and suppliers. And you'll notice that actually the format is different. One of them's got a content page, one of them doesn't. And you start scrolling through the document and you realize that one of them is numbered and one of them isn't. And you start to think to yourself, actually, is this a coherent suite of policies? Or is this just someone who's downloaded things across the documents, downloaded lots of documents across the internet, downloaded them, customized them, put their company name in there, and just gone for it and hope it. Those real basics can let you down. Make sure that you have a coherent, like, if your font is Arial, use the Arial font across the whole thing. If you're The standard size is 12. Use size 12 across the whole thing. I know it sounds really basic, but when we're looking at those documents, when we're looking at those from the other side, we're going to be thinking, is this company mature? Does it have everything nailed down in this area? And those are the little things that say, no, not really. You've downloaded things in a rush from the internet. Additionally, I talk about things about being mature as well. Be cautious about what you're committing to do in your policies and procedures. Again, coming back to that example of the £1 million turnover company for £20 million a year contract, are you committing to, a huge amount of work in terms of complying with your policies, or are they realistic for your size? Because again, we're going to be able to see that. That's quite obvious from the outside when you've got, incredibly detailed and long-winded. We've worked with a company recently that was very small. It was a 5-person company, and they showed us a document that they did for their data protection impact assessment, and it was about 30 pages long and full of details. And I spoke to them and said, "You don't use this, do you? It's obvious that you don't use it. Do you even know what's involved in this? Your DPIA template is so long and complicated that they didn't know how to use it." The reality was they would have been better off just going for a much smaller, much more easy to use, much more realistic DPIA template, because again, it shows that they understand it and that they're using it as part of their business. So a lot of this is for show and making sure that you're able to show and demonstrate that you're mature, you've got things nailed down, and that it's proportionate and realistic for your size. Because as I will keep coming back to, when you look at the Brexit ferry contract, these kind of things, when they go wrong, they can make the news. They will make the news, particularly if you're talking about central government contracts and stuff like that. So really, what I would say, to kind of briefly sum up, and then hopefully open up to some Q&A on some of the specifics. When we're thinking about data protection, compliance, information security requirements across the board, and the kind of things that the public sector are going to be looking for, it is an adequate level of maturity, a demonstration of coherence across the board, that there is a real coherence between policies and procedures, and also that there's an understanding of what they are and what they're involved in, so they're not ridiculously disproportionate, or 50 pages of documents for a 3-person company, that it's relevant and specific to the industry, and that you've got the basics in place. We're talking about privacy notices, records of processing agreements, basic risk assessments. An understanding of what to do if there's a breach or an incident is going to be particularly important. That you know where your assets and suppliers are, that you have some grasp of access control. You're aware of who has access to your system and what and why and all of those sorts of things. Those are the kind of basics that you're going to want to see in place to be able to say, yeah, okay, the company does have a broad understanding. They do have things proportionate. They do have things coherent, and things are to an adequate level of maturity that we're going to be working for. Because as I come back to where I very, very much started from, the public sector is very risk averse, and they're going to be very much unwilling to take a risk on a company that could expose them to a significant data breach or public embarrassment, such as the Brexit ferry contract. And these things are, the more these things happen, the more these things go wrong, as we know, the more that there's going to be a desire to take these things more seriously and look into more detail. But yeah, I mean, that would be my summary. I want to leave plenty of time for questions, because I think that this subject and all of these things they really open up once we get into some of the specifics and some of the things that people have concerns about. I guess, Tim, question for you in terms of just kind of kicking off the conversation while we wait for some questions of people coming in. When we're thinking about that kind of maturity and stuff like that of the business, what's kind of the biggest things that you see that can let people down around those areas?
I think it's worth noting that certainly on the policies, processes, and procedures side of things, in the tender process, we have noticed there has been a marked change in the amount of information people are requesting. So we're seeing public sector organizations are saying, can you provide this upon contract award, which I think is very useful, because historically, I think it used to put people off that they were required to provide 15 policies just to bid for it. What we're seeing more and more is that they'll ask for the main policies, which could be things like health and safety, equality and diversity. And then other aspects of policies, processes and procedures are, can you provide these if successful in the tender process? So I think there's definitely a piece of work to do to get ready for that. And the work that you guys is really important from that. I think if people are looking at where to get started from a policies and compliance process in terms of having a consistent batch of documentation, we quite often direct people towards the Federation of Small Business and the Chamber of Commerce, because each of those has a content library where you can get the basis of a document. And I'm assuming they then work with people like yourself, Tom, to refine those. Because they are very much standard policies, processes and procedures. But especially if you're a more specialist business, the last thing you want to do is fall down on the policies front.
I definitely recommend as well, when we're looking at specifically around data protection and information security around those areas, to check out the ICO's SME Hub. They've got a really good guidance for small and medium enterprises around the kind of things that you'd be expected to have in place, some of the basics, and they break it down into a really simple and easy to understand way. It's all written in plain English as well. And additionally, they have a very good accountability framework on their website as well, which sets about the kind of things that the ICO would expect every organization to be able to demonstrate. And from a regulation point of view, one key thing to remember is that the ICO regulate data in the UK, and they are the ones that regulate it. So their opinion matters, and what they expect to see matters, because they are the ones that effectively are responsible for upholding it. So they're a good place to look as well. And yeah, I think that I think you find it varies across, because we've been working with one, Tim. I feel like the NHS in particular are very hot on this. We had a customer the other day that was going through the contract process with the NHS. They had I think about 200 questions about information security and how they managed it as part of the NHS digital toolkit. That you can see a kind of mixture, and depending on kind of who you're working with and the size of the contract and all of those sorts of things can be good. So looking at those kind of bigger ones, you're going to be looking at things like the ICO accountability framework, the SME Hub on there, to get a real good understanding of the breadth of the things that you'd want to have in place to be able to demonstrate that accountability.
Great. Well, I think there's been a few questions submitted in advance. I know you've got those questions, Brona. I'll just pop this holding screen on, but I would encourage anyone, if you have got any questions, please do throw them in our direction. I don't know, Brona, would you like to dish those questions our way and see how we do?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll get the first question up here. So we've had a question in: do you have any advice for niche providers whose products may not be well known?
Yeah. So there's a number of things you can do. If you've got a niche product that isn't widely used in the marketplace, the key thing to do is to make those procurement teams aware that your product exists. They can't procure it if they don't know it's out there. So for example, there's quite a lot of tech solutions which solve problems that are put out to tender, but that tech solution doesn't necessarily fit with the questions and what's being procured. So in that case, I think it is early engagement as much as you can with local authorities, with NHS, housing associations, to make them aware that your solution actually exists in the marketplace. And if you see a tender come up, which is for a traditional solution, but you've got a more niche or new innovative solution, don't be afraid to express an interest in that tender opportunity and ask the question. Go into the tender portal and say, we have a solution. It's not exactly what you're procuring. It's different. It's innovative. This is what it is. Would you welcome an alternative tender submission, which answers the questions, but demonstrates what we have? Because we feel it can really deliver in terms of quality and cost saving. So I think, although the tender process is not about engagement, because it's all very much at a distance, in that scenario, I think it needs to be about that engagement and making people know that that solution exists.
Okay, perfect. The second question is, do government contracts tend to require data security certifications such as ISO or Cyber Essentials?
I think each tender opportunity will be different. It depends very much on the product or service you provide. If you're delivering a tech solution, I would think that ISO 27001 or Cyber Essentials will be a given in most scenarios. If you're doing something like, fixing the roads, less likely so. What's your experience of that, Tom?
Yeah, so it's definitely Cyber Essentials. Cyber Essentials is backed by the National Cybersecurity Council. It's backed by IASME. It's effectively a government scheme at this point. So that's going to be one. If you're dealing with large amounts of data, I think, yeah, as Tim said, it very much depends on what you do. But if you're dealing with large amount of data and kind of tech based, Cyber Essentials is going to be a must. It's going to make you, it's going to put you in a far stronger position. ISO 27001 is then the kind of next step. That's quite a big thing to get. It's quite a significant certification, but it really does show that you've got your house in order in terms of information security. So it will give you a significant advantage. Yes, we have seen that as a requirement of contracts in the public sector in the past, that they will expect ISO certification. Sometimes they can be flexible with this. One contract we've worked with has said we'll agree as long as you're working towards it and achieve it in X amount of time or something like that. But that's when you're dealing the more sensitive data you're dealing with. If you're working with the NHS and it's health data and stuff like that, almost certainly they're going to be pushing you towards that kind of, okay, we need to be thinking about an information security certification here, definitely. But again, yeah, as Tim said, it's going to be relative to the thing that you're doing and the sensitivity of the data and stuff like that.
What we definitely have seen in the past is where there's a requirement for something like Cyber Essentials, and during the tender process, someone said, "Well, I can deliver the service, but I don't have that, but we are working towards it." Again, they've jumped in the questions, they've asked the buyer, they've said, "We are working towards Cyber Essentials. Here's some evidence." It could be a letter that says they've appointed a certain provider, someone like Trust Keith, to support them with that. And you can make a commitment as part of your tender submission. So if you say the tender is going to be awarded in June and it's going to start delivery in July, you can say, we commit that prior to July, we will have the Cyber Essentials in place as a condition of contract award.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that this year with a big NHS contract.
But I think the thing is, if you see it's required and you don't have it, don't be put off. Don't think you're completely out of the process. Ask that question. And sometimes they will be flexible, but it very much depends on the product or service.
And particularly on that note, I mean, particularly Cyber Essentials Plus, most companies can do it. It's not a humongous ask if you're looking at that. It's realistic for most small companies. It is designed largely for small companies and will grow with you. So definitely don't be put off by Cyber Essentials. ISO 27001, as I said, it's a bit more stringent. It's quite a big certification to go for. And I would normally recommend kind of a lead time of at least a year to be looking at getting ISO 27001 in. So do bear that in mind. But Cyber Essentials can be turned around quite quickly.
But even then, I think my experience on the ISO, I know you definitely got a lot more experience than me, is it very much depends on the type of business you are. If you're a tech company, the ISO a year, absolutely. If you're a company that does very minimal data processing, from our experience, that can be a hell of a lot quicker. Would you say that's fair to say, Tom?
I think the complexity of the organization makes a difference. So yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of, I think the thing to be mindful of is dedicating internal resources to be able to deliver it. It does take a fair amount. I think also additionally building up enough evidence. ISO is about showing that you're managing information security, and you need to be able to demonstrate that for a period of time you have been managing it by the time of the audit. So it's not something where, for example, we could download a suite of documents off the internet today. Here's all the ISO documentation. Tomorrow, go for an audit and pass it. it's going to be, where's your evidence of this? When was your last risk review? Are senior management involved? Do you have minutes of those meetings and stuff like that? So you do want to give a bit of a lead time into ISO 27001. But yeah, you're delivering ISO 27001 across an organization that's based in the UK, USA, the Middle East. It's going to take potentially a couple of years. If you're dealing with a smaller organization, 10 people in the UK, you could shorten that time frame significantly.
Okay, one thing to highlight from my experience is those ISOs, the people might think of them as a hoop they've got to jump through, but actually it's not just that. It's something that you embed into your practice to actually improve the way you operate. So things like ISO 9001, which is a quality management system, it is what it says. It's a quality management system. It's a system designed to drive quality. So you should feel the benefits of that on your business for improved monitoring or reporting. So rather than it just being a compliance thing that you think is a headache, it's actually a practical tool to help you.
Yeah, and they're all not once and done either. I think is important to note. You need to maintain them. So you need to maintain them for a course of time before your first audit. There's then a few months before you're actually certified in the second stage 2 audit. But then it's a 3-year process. You are then audited again after a year and again after a second year to show that you've continued to make improvement. You continue to use this as a day-to-day. And if you don't, you can lose your certification upon that kind of surveillance audit that happens afterwards. So these are kind of long-term projects and about the day-to-day. And yes, they do provide that kind of organizational change for in a good way. So definitely worth considering, even if it's not necessarily a contractual requirement. There's still something that you can consider to get more secure, to get better understanding of quality control and stuff like that.
Okay. Was there another question there, Brona?
Yes, we have 2 more. So as a startup company or a company without any credit history or credit score, do you have a chance, or are you just wasting your time? So maybe for yourself, Tim.
Yes, you definitely have a chance. You're not wasting your time. It very much depends upon the business and what you do. If you are someone that's done this before and you've worked in the sector, or if you've done something like a management buyout and that management set up a new company, you can draw upon that experience and knowledge that you've got personally to support you in tender submissions. The main challenge that you face is in financial assessment. So typically a tender will ask for 2 or 3 years worth of accounts, but it does give you the option to provide alternatives. So you can provide year-to-date cash flow and projections for the rest of the year to demonstrate your financial stability, so you can show that you've made profit every month for so many months and demonstrating the continual uptick of that revenue. And the other thing you can look at is frameworks and DPS. So a framework and a DPS, as I mentioned, are opportunities that to become an approved supplier. There's typically little or no financial assessment as part of that, unless you're going for a framework which is delivering construction work between £1 and £4 million. But if you're going for a framework to deliver your product or service between £0 and £200,000, there's going to be very little financial due diligence as part of that. It's a case of picking the opportunities in the right way. And I think, as I keep emphasizing, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Go into the portal, say, we're a new business. What can we provide to give you confidence that we are a suitable provider for this service? Use your accountant as well, because your accountant can put together a cash flow and say, this is the cash flow for the year. And that can really help you with tendering when you're totally new. But don't be afraid to ask those questions. They might just say straight up, sorry, if you haven't got 2 years worth of accounts, it's not right for you. But there are usually other ways that you can demonstrate it.
Okay, perfect. And we have another question through on the live chat. So does the public sector favour any data handling software over another, such as Azure over AWS on a technical standpoint?
I thought are you going, Tom, or do you want me to?
Yeah, happy to. I think in the UK, not especially from a compliance perspective, the biggest concern is going to be over where is the data. So data transfers are going to be quite important. if you use AWS, for example, your data could be stored in Dublin, in Ireland, in which case there's no need for additional safeguards. The UK government has, recognized that that's a safe place to put your data. If, for example, you're using AWS and your servers are based in America, that's not going to be the case anymore. So it really, the big deal is around from an information security data protection perspective, is around where is that data stored, where are you transferring it across the world, and the government will tend to have quite strict requirements around that, because obviously if you are giving them data and then you are transferring it to the US, it's then subject to US surveillance by the NSA and things like that. You've got FISA, the Federal Investigations Security Act in America, and all of those sorts of things that come into play that puts that data at risk. So really, we're thinking about where are you sending that data. To be really obvious and to make this really straightforward, if you were hosting that data in servers in Russia or China, I highly doubt that the UK government would be happy with that. That's the kind of thing that you want to be thinking about with those data sets. So you should understand what your data is, where it goes, where it's stored, and that's going to be important. I think, Tim, maybe you can add something from what's the kind of preference in usage of systems.
Yeah, the tender documents will usually specify what it is they're looking for. They might say we're looking for an Azure solution. They might say we're looking for an AWS solution. So have a look. And again, if they say they want one over another, ask the question, say, will we do AWS? And this is why we think we should consider that. And they are open to those types of discussions and might say, yes, that's absolutely fine. I think historically, we've seen that data must be held within the European Economic Community area, but who knows how that'll change. There's the procurement reform bill, which is happening at the moment. The procurement reform bill is going to change the rules on procurement. So we're no longer following European procurement legislation. We're moving to World Trade Organization legislation. And it's where that data transfer and security arrangement that we had with Europe stays in place, or whether they're going to get actually much more strict and say it's got to be within the UK. But have a look, ask the question, and just see what the specification says.
Yeah, and I think I'd recommend keep an eye on this because we have seen, not in the UK, but for example in France, the French regulator stopped the French health service from being able to use Microsoft because the data went to the US. These things can happen. They have happened across Europe, and we have a regulator who's working to the same rules at the moment as those guys are. So do keep an eye on it. Do keep an eye on the position. I think that my honest appraisal of this is I can't see the UK government getting overly strict with data transfers because of the economic ties and things like that, and the kind of bigger geopolitical situation. But as we know, politics is a fickle beast. So do keep an eye on it, because it can change at very short notice. And so the key thing there is to really understand, where is that data? Where is it? Are we secure in that sense? Can we make the change? Do we have the capability if the UK said you cannot transfer data to Ireland anymore? Do we know that the data is in Ireland, and do we know what we would do with it as a result of that? What is our business continuity planning around things like that? And having something like that in mind is not only going to protect you as a business in general, but is also going to give confidence to anyone working with you that if anything were to change, you could continue to deliver a service for them.
Great stuff. I think that's just about it for the questions, unless there's anyone else wants to jump in with any, or if there's anything else you wanted to say, Tom, before we sign off.
Yeah, I think someone's going to have a question. I can see there's people here. Someone's going to be brave enough to ask a question.
Well, that's fine. I would say, if anyone's got any questions they didn't want to ask in the group, feel free to reach out to myself, Tim Ward. You can find me usually on LinkedIn, or Tom. What's the best way to get hold of yourself, Tom?
Yeah, same. You find me on LinkedIn as well, Tom Jell. Additionally, jump on our website. We've got an inquiry form. You got any questions? Just put it on there. It's trustkeith.co. So just jump on there, ask us any questions, and we can have a chat with you.
Yeah. And if anyone's interested in the world of tenders, there's a QR code bottom left of your screen. Feel free to scan that. You can sign up to a free trial of Opportunity. And I think all that's left to say is thank you very much for taking the time today. Hope it's been useful and informative for everyone. And anything at all, just reach out to us.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks everyone for coming, and thanks Tim for your overview.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Bye-bye.